After 2 months of horror and pain, and the world is still trying to figure out who is winning the Russia-Ukraine war, which has resulted in thousands of deaths, millions of displaced people, and the destruction of major cities. Both Russia and Ukraine have been severely damaged by all means. But still the question persists: who won? Well, in this video, we are going to share a few glimpses of the Russia-Ukraine war and try to figure out who is winning. Hello everyone, welcome to the Ukraine war. We are here to deliver to you all the new political movements regarding the Russia-Ukraine conflicts, the casualties, strategies, and the aftermaths of the ongoing war in detail. Subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon if you don't want to miss any of those. So without wasting any further time, let's hop in. When Russian President Vladimir Putin dispatched tanks and troops to Ukraine on February 24, there was no formal indication of a timetable for achieving his objectives. However, it was widely predicted that his superior military would compel Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky's army to submit soon. This has not occurred. In truth, Ukraine is reclaiming territory as Russia appears to abandon its operation in the north, where it has inflicted great destruction in the face of continued Ukrainian opposition and shifts its full concentration to the east. Let's break it down region-wise. Putin soldiers could never enter Kyiv from the north. According to the Institute for the Study of War, which was reported by the BBC, they have now withdrawn from the area surrounding Ukraine's capital and moved across the border into Belarus and western Russia. Ukraine is retaking huge areas around Kyiv, despite the presence of a half-dozen Russian tanks and armored personnel carriers in the area. Ukraine has also retaken significant territory in the Chernihiv region, which is sandwiched between Kyiv and Russia. After Russian troops were ousted from Trostyanets in northeastern Ukraine, a destroyed Russian tank sat in the town's demolished town center. Such situations are becoming more prevalent in this battle, which has triggered Europe's largest refugee crisis since World War II. Apart from Kherson, Russia has not taken any large cities in the south. Ukraine is fighting Russia at the port city of Mariupol in the same region. This is critical because Russia has been attempting to establish a land corridor between Crimea, which Putin annexed in 2014, and territory controlled by Russian-backed separatists in Donbass, Donetsk, and Luhansk in the east. Mariupol, for Putin, stands in the path of his goal. Anyway, one of Putin's main goals was to demilitarize Ukraine and keep it neutral in his long-running strategic conflict with NATO, the U.S.-dominated Western military alliance, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. However, what has occurred thus far is the polar opposite. Because Ukraine is not a member of NATO, the West has avoided open war with Russia, but it has funneled vast military supplies into Zelensky. Despite repeated Russian invasion threats, Ukraine, a key buffer between Russia and the West, had not been weaponized in recent years. In his latest remarks, NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg said, "I will not get into all the details of exactly what kind of weaponry equipment allies are supplying, but I can say the entirety of what the allies are doing is important." Rather than achieving Ukrainian neutrality, Russia's efforts have moved Zelensky closer to the West. But for a moment, let's play devil's advocate. After a month of heavy warfare, Russia announced that the first phase of its special military operation in Ukraine was nearly complete, and that it now would devote its whole attention to liberating Donbass, from where thousands are already fleeing. Ukraine's military potential has been significantly weakened, allowing us to concentrate our efforts on the main goal, the liberation of Donbass on the Russian border. Russia has started. However, Russia-backed insurgents already had a large portion of Donbass under their hands. Putin declared Donetsk and Luhansk separate states on the eve of the invasion. So, given Russia's full emphasis on Donbass and the West's growing and punitive sanctions on Moscow, is Russia's total attention on Donbass a pretext to seek an exit from Ukraine? However, if Putin has enough people and equipment left after completing his objectives in eastern Ukraine, he could try to re-invade the Kyiv region, according to U.S. and European sources. But is he capable of doing so? In a war that has seen multiple rounds of peace talks fail to cease the violence, there are no clear answers. What is clear is that Russia's invasion has forced Zelensky deeper into the embrace of the West, which has ensured that Ukraine is more weaponized than ever before, while avoiding greater Russian enmity by avoiding direct battle. And this weaponization is just going to get worse in the future. Analysts and journalists have reluctantly acknowledged that Russia's invasion of Ukraine has been thwarted and that the battle has reached a standstill. The truth is, the Ukrainians are likely to win. But why aren't Western analysts reluctant to admit that Ukraine's on the winning side? Most Russian military experts predicted a quick and decisive Russian victory, then argued that the Russians would pause, learn from their mistakes, and regroup. Finally, they concluded that the Russians would have performed much better if they had followed their doctrine, and now they mutter that everything can change, that the war is not over, and that the weight of numbers still favors Russia. Their failure to analyze will be just one of the aspects of this battle that will be studied in the future. At the same time, there are few analysts of the Ukrainian military, a more esoteric specialty, and as a result, the West has tended to overlook Ukraine's success since 2014, thanks to the hard-won experience and intensive training from the US, UK, and Canada. The Ukrainian military has shown itself to not only be motivated and well-led, but also tactically adept, combining light infantry with anti-tank weaponry, drones, and artillery fire to defeat considerably bigger Russian military forces on numerous occasions. The Ukrainians aren't just protecting their urban strongholds, they're also maneuvering from and between them, adopting Clausewitz's dictum that the best defense is a shield of well-directed strikes. The reluctance to acknowledge what is happening in Ukraine stems, in part, from academics' protectiveness for their subject, even if they despise it on moral grounds, but more so from a tendency to emphasize technology, numbers by which they dominate, but only to a point, and doctrine. In certain aspects, the Russian army is still quite cerebral, and intellectuals are all too willing to praise sophisticated tactical and operational thinking without putting much effort into practice. However, the war has compelled us to consider the human aspect. Most modern militaries, for example, rely heavily on a robust cadre of non-commissioned officers. Sergeants oversee the upkeep of vehicles and provide direction in squad tactics. The Russian NCO Corps is weak and corrupt today, as it has always been. Without qualified NCOs, even enormous numbers of technologically advanced vehicles deployed by a convincing doctrine will break down or be abandoned, and infantry will be ambushed or break down under fire. The West's largest roadblock to success is that we've grown accustomed to thinking of ourselves as stuck, ineffective, or inept over the last 20 years. It's time to move on from that and analyze the facts in front of us. If one looks closely at the available facts, there is ample proof that Ukraine is winning this fight. The lack of Russian progress on the front lines is only half of the picture, which is hidden by maps depicting large red blobs that represent not what the Russians hold, but the territories through which they have driven. The failure of practically all of Russia's airborne attacks, its inability to eliminate Ukraine's air force and air defense system, and the weeks-long paralysis of the 40-mile supply column north of Kyiv all point to the same conclusion. According to various sources, Russia has lost between 7,000 and 14,000 soldiers, implying a minimum of almost 30,000 men removed off the battlefield due to wounds, captivity, or disappearance. This amount would account for at least 15% of the whole invading force, rendering most units' battles ineffective. There's no reason to believe the loss rate is slowing down. In fact, Western intelligence services are briefing on unsustainable Russian casualty rates exceeding 1,000 per day. The 1-to-1 ratio of damaged vehicles to seized or abandoned vehicles indicates an army unwilling to fight. The Russian military's failure to focus its forces on one or two attack axes or to capture a large city is startling, as are its vast logistics and maintenance issues, which have been meticulously examined by technically informed observers. The Russian army has committed nearly all of its combat units to the battle. There is very little behind those powers. Russian reserves, unlike the U.S. National Guard, Israeli or Finnish reservists, have no training, and Putin has promised that the next wave of conscripts will not be sent over, though he is unlikely to keep his word. The swaggering Chechen auxiliary have been heavily struck, and they aren't used to, or available for, combined arms operations in the first place. Domestic unrest has been stifled, but it is erupting again as bold individuals protest and hundreds of thousands of tech-savvy young people flee. It is not clear whether Russia is involved in cyber warfare. Ukraine's communications have not been disrupted by Russia's electronic warfare forces. A half-dozen generals have been slain, either as a result of poor signal security or as a result of frantically trying to unstick objects on the front lines. Then there are the negative indicators on the opposite side. No Ukrainian capitulations, no noteworthy panics or unit collapses, and only a few local quislings, while the bigger Russophile fish, such as politician Viktor Medvedchuk, prudently remain silent or leave the country. Local Ukrainian counterattacks and Russian withdrawals have also been reported. These tendencies have not always been highlighted in the media, Pictures of broken hospitals, dead children, and blasted apartment blocks accurately represent the anguish and brutality of this war, but they do not convey its military realities, as Phillips P. O'Brien of the University of St. Andrews has maintained. To put it bluntly, if the Russians flatten a town and slaughter its residents, they are unlikely to have killed the town's defenders, who will avenge themselves on the invaders by doing astonishing and effective things from the ruins. After all, this is what the Russians did to the Germans in their cities 80 years ago. This war, like most, is being fought by two coalitions, mostly but not completely made up of Russian and Ukrainian citizens. Most pundits have framed the war too narrowly, portraying it as a struggle only between Russia and Ukraine. Thousands of advanced weaponry, including anti-tank and anti-aircraft missiles from around the world, as well as drones, sniper rifles, and other military gear, are flooding into Ukraine every day. The U.S. intelligence community would be fools not to provide this material to Ukrainians, especially real-time intelligence. The concept of stalemate obscures the dynamic nature of warfare. The more successful you are, the more likely you are to succeed in the future. We may see more obvious Russian unit failures if the Ukrainians continue to prevail. Regrettably, the Russian military will hurriedly increase its focus on the one thing it does well: bombing communities and killing civilians. Now is the time to empower them with the necessary weight and urgency. In terms of the endgame, it should be guided by the recognition that Putin is one hell of a nasty man, but not a coward. He'll let us know when he needs an off-ramp. Until then, piling on is the only way to terminate the war with the least amount of human suffering. With that being said, that takes us to the end of the episode. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. Don't hesitate to subscribe to our channel and push notifications bell to keep up with our work. See you soon. Until then, peace.